Inequality in education? What? How? Two schools, same country, completely different. Although the U.S. education system claimed to provide equal opportunity for all students, the persistence of segregated schools, unequal access to school fundings and resources created racial disparity that disadvantaged Black and Latino community academically.
What is segregation? Segregation is a state or action of separating someone or something from others. By the late 19th century, the Jim Crow laws began to take action where racial segregation began. The Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 established the doctrine of separate but equal. This allowed segregation among races as long as they were equal. In this case, we will focus on racial segregation in education. There were different schools designated for each race. Black people and white people were separated. This was mainly implemented in the southern part of the United States. After years of inequality and segregation, the United States Supreme Court case Brown v. Board of Education overturned the doctrine of separate but equal, which was originally implemented by Plessy v. Ferguson. It was overturned due to it being a violation of the 14th Amendment, making it unconstitutional. Although this happened many years ago, today we are still experiencing segregation among races in neighborhoods and schools.
Unequal school fundings has always been a problem and it still exists today. But where do we get the school funding? According to LinkedIn Institute of Land Policies, property taxations and school fundings are closely linked in the United States. 45% of total public K-12 education revenues comes from local government, and 80% of local shares comes from property tax, meaning that public school funding highly depends on local government, and it comes from local property tax. Wealthier neighborhoods will have higher local property taxes and have more fundings for schools within the areas. Meanwhile, low-income neighborhoods are often Black and Latino communities that have lower local property taxes will have less fundings for the schools within the areas. But how do these unequal fundings affect the school in reality? In underfunded school, one main issue is the lack of teachers. They usually struggle to hire experienced teachers, while higher funded schools are able to offer higher salaries, good working environments, and quality resources. The effect of that is that the class size in underfunded schools is usually larger due to shortage of teachers, which means that the students will get less individual helps and attentions. There is also the issues with lack of supplies, such as technologies and textbooks. Along with poor conditions of the school buildings, these factors make it difficult for students to have a well-learning environment. With well-funded school, there will be more resources offered to students to prepare for college and access to extracurricular activities, while the underfunded schools might not have. The National Assessment of Educational Progress NAEP is a test provided to randomly chosen students in which reflects on students' learning experience and academic performances. According to the National's report card, in 2024, 44% of white 8th graders scored proficiency or above in the reading sections, compared to 18% of Black students and 21% of Hispanic students. The statistics reveals a major gap in academic performances among racial groups, which often draws connection to unequal access of educational resources. This racial disparity can also be presented inside a school environment.
In schools, it is very clear how students of color are treated in comparison to white students. According to racial disparities in schools-based disciplinary actions are associated with county-level rates of racial bias. They state, for instance, a controlled experiment using hypothetical vignettes found that in comparison with white students, teachers were more likely to view the same behavior from Black students as being indicative of a long-term problem and deserving suspension. This shows us evidence of racial bias in school. To add on, Travis Riddle and Stacy Sinclair also say, similarly, discipline data from an urban high school showed that Black students were especially likely to be referred to the Office for Discipline on the basis of defiant behavior, a relatively subjective category of misbehavior in comparison with others they examine, included truancy or fighting. This right here tells us a lot about how a student is viewed just based on their race. This is significant because it tells us how schools don't follow discipline rules based on actions, but instead also discipline based on assumptions and stereotypes. If schools continue with these actions, it can further affect the student who is constantly being punished by making them feel less than others.
You may ask, why does racial inequality in education matter in the bigger picture? Well, it matters because education is supposed to be the main way people improve their lives, but not everyone gets the same opportunities. Moreover, people of different races often attend underfunded schools, where there are fewer learning resources available. Because of this, they receive a lower quality of education compared to others. This connects to society because people who don't have access to a good education are less likely to succeed in school, graduate, get into college, or land well-paying jobs. This shows that education has a huge impact on someone's future, including their career, income, and overall standard of living. In the long term, not having a quality education can lead to serious negative effects. For example, people who receive a weaker education may struggle to find stable jobs and earn enough money. Because of this, they may also face poor living conditions and even health issues. Overall, this example shows how inequality in education leads to other types of social inequality. Students from low-income families often go to underfunded schools, which limits their opportunities. As a result, they may end up with lower-paying jobs, and their children may face the same challenges. This creates a cycle of inequality that is hard to break. This shows that racial inequality in education is important because it does not just affect students in school, it also impacts their future. It can lead to long-term disadvantages and fewer opportunities in life. If education isn't fair to begin with, then it's hard for anything else in life to be fair either. Overall, the main idea of this project is how do segregation and unequal school funding contribute to racial disparities in education in the United States. Throughout all the articles we have read, the United States claims to provide equal education and opportunities to students. Racial inequality in education still exists because schools in Black and Latino communities are normally underfunded and does not have enough resources for students. Historical segregation, unequal school funding is based on property taxes and school facilities, continue to put minority students at a disadvantage, both socially and academically. This is a super important concern because education is supposed to help people grow as a person and to succeed in life. But not every student can get the same opportunity for success. Students who attend underfunded schools often do not have good education because they have fewer teachers, outdated materials, and less support, which affects how students can do well in school and get into college. Thank you so much.